Hello, everybody. September has come. And that means, as far as I'm concerned, it's Halloween Eve. Now, got my start celebrating the entire month of September as part of spooky season from following the lead of my friend Roger Barr on his website, imockery.com. And there is still a great deal of fun and interesting stuff to be had on that website, though he hasn't updated in a few years since the unfortunate passing of his wife, Marie, who was a very talented artist. Her art was poignant and beautiful. And I really mourn her loss as well, though she and I never met. We did exchange brief email correspondence discussing her art and also some things that she did to contribute to the fun at iMockery. So I fully recommend that website and encourage you to go check it out. Uh, some of the humor is definitely of the time there from the earlier 2000s when a lot of the edgy humor was still quite prevalent and popular. So there's salty language and that sort of thing. But if you understand that, or go in with the understanding that it's in good fun and nobody means any harm, I'm sure you'll enjoy yourself. Now, today, I want to share one of my favorite Japanese spooky stories. This is the story of the Hachishakusama, the 8-foot tall woman. You may recognize her from Shrekland. I'm going to tell you my favorite version of the Hachishakusama story, or Hashakusama, if I'm going to try harder to have a good accent, and I usually don't. I'm American. I try my best, but anyway, you now will begin the story of the boogeywoman. My grandparents lived in Japan. Every summer, my parents would take me there on holiday to visit them. They lived in a small village, and they had a big backyard. I loved to play there during the summer. When we arrived, my grandparents always welcomed me with open arms. I was the only grandchild, so they spoiled me a bit. The last time I saw them was the summer when I was 8 years old. As usual, my parents booked a flight, and we drove from the airport to my grandparents' house. They were delighted to see me and had a lot of little presents to give me. My parents wanted to have some time by themselves, so after a few days, they took a trip to another part, leaving me in the care of my Oji-san and Oba-san. One day, I was playing out in the backyard. My grandparents were inside. It was a hot summer's day, and I lay down on the grass to have a rest, staring up at the clouds. I enjoyed the feeling of the soft rays of the sun and the gentle breeze. And just as I was about to get up, I heard a strange sound. Bo, 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 bo. I didn't know what it was, and it was hard to figure out where it was coming from. It sounded almost like someone was making the noise themselves, as if they were just saying po, po, po over and over again in a deep, gravelly, masculine voice. I was looking around, searching for the source of this noise. when I suddenly noticed something on top of the tall hedges that enclosed the backyard. It was a straw hat, and it wasn't resting on the hedge, it was behind it. That was where the sound was coming from, and I heard it again. Bo, 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 bo. Then the hat began to move, as if someone was wearing it. The hat stopped at a small gap in the hedge, and I could see a face peering through the leaves. It was a woman, but the hedges were high, almost 8 feet tall. I was surprised at how tall the woman must have been. I wondered if she was walking on stilts or some platform shoes. And then, a split second later, she walked off, and the strange sound disappeared with her. I heard it fading into the distance. Bewildered, I got up and I wandered back into the house. My grandparents were in the kitchen, and they were just having afternoon tea. I sat down at the table with them, and after a while, I found the words to tell my grandparents what I had seen. They weren't paying that much attention until I mentioned that distinctive sound, and I tried as best I could to mimic it. Po, 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 po. As soon as I said that, both of them suddenly froze. Obasan's eyes grew wide, and she covered her mouth with her hand. Oji-san's face became very serious, and he grabbed me by the arm. He said, "This is very important." His voice was intense. "You must tell us exactly. How tall was she?" "As tall as the garden hedge," I replied, beginning to get scared. And my grandfather bombarded me with questions. "Where was she standing? When did this happen? What did you do? Did she see you?" I tried to answer all his questions as best I could. He suddenly rushed out into the hallway and made a phone call. I couldn't hear what he was saying. I looked over at Obasan. She was trembling. Oji-san came barging back into the room, and he spoke to Obasan. "I've got to go out for a while," he said. "You stay here with the child, and don't you take your eyes off him for a second." "Oji-san, what's going on?" I cried. He looked at me with a very sad expression in his eyes, and he said, "You've been liked by the Hachishakusama." With that, he hurried out. He got into his truck, and I heard it drive away. I turned to my grandmother, and I cautiously asked, "Obasan, who is this Hachishakusama?" "Don't worry," she replied, but her voice was shaking. "Oji-san will do something. There's no need for you to worry. Your grandfather knows what to do." And so we sat nervously in the kitchen waiting for Oji-san to come back. She explained what was happening to me. She told me that there was a dangerous thing that was haunting the area. They called it the 8-foot tall woman. And that's what the name meant, Hachishakusama. And the thing takes on the appearance of an extremely tall woman, very long arms, very long legs, and it makes that sound like I described, po, 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 in a deep male voice. And it will appear slightly differently depending on who sees it. Some will say that it looks like a haggard old woman wearing a kimono, and others say it is a younger woman wearing a white funeral shroud. But the thing that never changes is its height and the sound that it makes. And I wondered why it would appear to me to be wearing a straw hat and in an old-fashioned style. And a long time ago, Obasan said, it was captured by monks, and they managed to confine it into a ruined building on the outskirts of the village. They trapped it using 4 small Jizo statues placed at the north, south, east, and west of the ruins. The Jizo statues were supposed to keep it trapped there. Somehow it managed to escape. The last time that it appeared, she told me it was 15 years ago. And Obasan said that anyone who saw the Hachishakusama was destined to die within a few days. It all sounded so crazy. I wasn't sure what to believe. When Oji-san came back, there was an old woman with him, and she introduced herself as Kei-san. And she handed me a small crumpled piece of parchment. She said, "Here, take this and hold it." And then she and Oji-san went upstairs and started doing something. I could hear them moving things around. And again, I was left alone in the kitchen with Obasan. And then I needed to use the toilet. And Obasan followed me to the door. She wouldn't let me shut it, though. I was beginning to get very frightened by all this. After a while, Oji-san and Kei-san took me upstairs and they brought me into my bedroom. The windows were all covered in newspapers, and there were a lot of ancient runes that had been written on them. And there were small bowls of salt in all 4 corners of the room, and a small Buddha statue placed in the center of the room on top of a wooden box, and a bright blue plastic bucket. "What's the bucket for?" I asked. "In case you need to use the bathroom again," Oji-san replied. And then Kei-san sat me down on my bed, and she said, "Soon, my boy, the sun will be setting, so listen carefully. You must stay in this room until tomorrow morning. You must not open the door or the windows under any circumstances until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Your grandmother and your grandfather will not speak to you or call out for you until then. So remember, do not leave the room for any reason. I will let you know, and I will let your parents know what's going on. So don't open the door. Not until 7 o'clock." Her tone was so grave that all I could do was quietly nod. "You have to follow Kei-san's instructions to the letter," Oji-san told me, "and never let go of that parchment she gave to you. And if anything happens, pray to Buddha. Make sure you lock the door behind us when we leave, too." So they walked out into the hallway, and after saying goodbye, closed the door and I locked it, just like Oji-san told me. I turned on a TV and tried to watch, but I was so nervous. I felt sick to my stomach. And Obasan left some snacks and some rice balls for me in there, but couldn't even eat. Must have been what prison feels like. And I was scared and depressed, too. I lay down in the bed and I waited, and at some point I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was just after 1 a.m. And very suddenly, I noticed something had been tapping on the window. Tap, 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 tap. In threes, just like the po, 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 po had been. And I felt the blood draining from my face. My heart skipped a beat. Doki, doki, doki. I desperately tried to calm myself down. I told myself that it was just the wind playing tricks, or maybe the branches of the tree. But I knew none of the trees in the backyard were tall enough to hit the window. So I turned up the volume on the TV to try and drown out that tapping noise. Eventually, it stopped. And that was when I heard Oji-san calling out to me. He said, "Are you okay in there? If you're scared, you don't have to stay in there all alone. I can come in and keep you company." I smiled with relief and I rushed over to the door, but then I stopped in my tracks and I had goosebumps all over my body. It had sounded like Oji-san, but something was different. I couldn't pinpoint what it was. I just knew. "What are you doing?" Oji-san asked. "You can open the door now." And I glanced over to my left, and it was as if ice water ran down my back. The salt in the bowls was turning black. I backed away from the door. My whole body was trembling with fear now. I fell to my knees and I looked at the Buddha statue and I clutched the piece of parchment tight in my hand and I started to pray for help desperately. "Please save me. Please save me from the Hachishakusama. Please, Lord Buddha." Then I heard the voice. This time it was right outside my door. "Po, po, po. Po, po, po." The voice was outside my door, but the tapping on the window started up again. Tap, 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 tap. I was overcome with fear. I crouched there in front of the Buddha statue, half crying, half praying. And it must have been for the rest of the night. I felt like it would never end. But eventually, I saw the light of morning. And the salt in all four bowls had turned pitch black. I didn't know what it meant, but it couldn't be anything good, I was sure. And I looked at the clock. 7:30 a.m. I cautiously unlocked the door, and I saw Obasan and Kei-san standing outside. They were waiting for me there in the hall. And when she saw my face, Obasan burst into tears. She told me she was so glad I was still alive. I followed them downstairs, and I was surprised to see that my parents were there in the kitchen. And then Oji-san came in, and he said, "Hurry up, we've got to get going." And we went to the front door, and there was a large black van waiting in the driveway. And several men from the village were standing around it. They whispered and pointed at me. "That's the boy." The van was a 9-seater, and they put me in the center. I was surrounded by 8 men, and Kei-san was in the front passenger seat. The man on my left looked down at me and he said, "You've got yourself in quite a spot of trouble. I know how you're probably worried. So you keep your head down and keep your eyes shut. We can't see it, but you will. Don't you open your eyes until we get you safely out of here." So Ji-san got into the driver's seat, and my father's car followed behind. When everyone was ready, our little convoy started moving. We were going fairly slow, maybe only 20 kilometers per hour, maybe less. And after a while, Kei-san said, "This is when it gets hard." And she started muttering something under her breath. I guess it must have been a prayer or a magic spell of some kind. And then I heard the voice. Po, 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 po. I clutched that parchment still. I kept my head down. I closed my eyes, but something forced me to peek. And outside the window, I saw a white dress, old-fashioned dress, fluttering as if it was just in the breeze, hanging from a clothesline. But it wasn't. It was moving. And it was moving along with the van. It was the Hachishakusama. She was outside the window. She was somehow keeping pace with us. And suddenly, she bent down, and her face went right against the glass. "No!" I gasped. And the man beside me shouted, "Close your eyes, boy!" I immediately shut my eyes as hard as I could, and I put both hands on the parchment. And then the tapping started, just like before. The tapping was louder than it had been on my bedroom window. And the voice was louder because I knew it was right there. And then there was tapping on all the windows. All around us, that sound. All of the men in the van were startled, and they were on edge, and they were muttering nervously to themselves, and a few of them prayed. They couldn't see Hachishakusama. They couldn't hear her voice, but they heard that tapping on the windows. Kei-san started chanting louder, and she was almost shouting. The tension inside the van was almost unbearable, and I felt this pressure on my head, on my neck, pressing down on me, squeezing me. And after a while, the tapping stopped, and the voice disappeared. Kei-san turned to look back at us, and I opened my eyes, and she said, "I think we're safe now." And all of the men let out a sigh of relief. The van pulled over to the side of the road. All the men got out. They moved me to my dad's car. And my mom was in the back seat, and she held me. She was crying. Oji-san and my father bowed to the men, and then they all went on their way. Kei-san came to the window, and she asked me to give her the piece of parchment. When I handed it to her, I saw that it, too, had gone as black as the salt. "I think you'll be okay now," she said. "But just to be sure, take this." And she handed me a new piece of parchment. And after that, we drove straight to the airport. And Oji-san saw us safely onto the plane. When we took off, my parents breathed another sigh of relief. My father told me that he had heard about Hachishakusama before. Years ago, one of his friends had been liked by her. 15 years ago. That boy disappeared and was never seen again. My father said that there are other people who had been liked by her. They lived to tell about it, but all of them had to leave Japan and settle down someplace else. They were never able to go back to their homeland. He said she always chooses children as her victims. They say it's because children are dependent on their parents and families. This makes them easier to deceive when she uses her tricks to pose as their relatives. He said that the men in the van were all blood relatives of ours. And that was why they had been sitting all around me, and why my father and Oji-san had been driving in the front and in the back. It was all done to try and confuse the Hachishakusama because she could smell my blood. It took a while to contact everyone and get them all together. That was why I had been confined that whole night. He told me that they had found one of the Jizo statues. Its head had been broken off, and that was how she had escaped. It gave me the chills. I was glad to finally get back home. Well, it's been 10 years since then. I haven't been able to see Oba-san or Oji-san since then. I haven't been able to so much as set foot in Japan. Afterwards, I'd call them every so often, and we'd talk on the phone at least. And as the years went by, I tried to convince myself that it was just an urban legend, something that was just an elaborate prank, maybe. But other times, I can't convince myself. 2 years ago, Oji-san died. Even though he was sick, he wouldn't allow me to visit him. He left strict instructions in his will that I was not allowed to attend his funeral. I love my grandfather. It was also very sad. Just a few days ago, Obasan called. She said that she had been diagnosed with cancer, and she missed me terribly. She wanted to see me one last time before she died too. I said, "Are you sure, Obasan? Is it safe?" "It's been 10 years," she said. "All that happened a long time ago. It's all forgotten. You're all grown up now. I'm sure there won't be any problem. Hachishakusama surely wouldn't have any interest in an 18-year-old man." I said, "But are we sure?" And for a moment there was silence on the other end of the phone. And then I heard that deep masculine voice. Po, 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 po.